Hey piano people, let's talk about what most piano players completely miss in Measure 1. This monthly video series completely changes the way that you practice, play, and listen, not just to this piece, but to any piece forever, so that you can finally sound like the musician you know you are. And this is because the opening measure in any piece of music holds the key to everything. Rhythm, fingering, articulation, the mood and the emotion of the piece. And how you start that first measure will either build your confidence or break it. And in today's video, make sure that you stay tuned until the very end because I have a crazy announcement and you are not going to want to miss it. Hey piano people, I'm Ashlee. I've practiced over 20,000 hours. I've taught adult piano players from all over the world. I spent over $100,000 on 2 piano performance degrees. And here on this channel, I teach you how to practice smarter, not harder. Let's dive in. We're looking at the Minuet in G today. A lot of people attribute this piece to Bach, but it was actually written by a composer named Christian Petzold. The first thing that most piano players miss in Measure 1 is articulation. And here's a little bit of what Minuet in G sounds like so that you have it in your ear as we dive into what most people miss in Measure 1. Okay, so this piece comes from the Baroque period, which in Western classical music history was from 1600 to 1750. And in this time period, articulation was of the utmost importance. And this is because composers during this time period were not writing for the modern piano that we have today. They were writing for other keyboard instruments like the harpsichord and the clavichord. And those instruments did not have the same capabilities that the modern piano has with dynamics, meaning that you didn't have the wide range of piano or quiet all the way through forte or fortissimo or very loud. And so a lot of the expression in this time period was tied back to articulation. Things like staccatos, legato, tenutos, two-note slurs, all of that good stuff. And if we look at this Minuet in G, we can play around with the articulation in Measure 1. And part of that is because a lot of the articulation in this time period comes from your artistic choice. We are looking at this score of Minuet in G, but if you were to look up 5 or 10 other editions of this exact same score, you would find 3 to 5 variations in the articulations, meaning this one is a detached note, right? We play the D of the melody and it's detached, and then legato, legato, but you might also see detached, staccato, or no articulation written in which case technically that means that you play everything detached. Right? And I'm messing up the left hand there, but you get the point, where that right hand is going to sound very different depending on the articulation. Now, this is true of Measure 1, but this is also true of the entire piece and of any piece that you play in any time period, but especially in the Baroque period. You need to decide on the articulation. So the best way to do this is to look up several different editions of the score, to listen to several different recordings, and decide, what do you like best? What is your artistic interpretation of the articulation? The second thing that most piano players miss in Minuet in G is the note values. Now, this could go under rhythm in general, but I wanted to get even a little more specific with this particular piece. So let's say that underneath the articulation, you decided to do it how this score is written. So you play the first D detached, and then you play the next 4 notes in Measure 1 legato. The reason that note values are so important is because we want to make sure that all of the notes are held for their full value, especially the longer valued notes. So I'm going to show you what I hear, and I want you to see if you can guess one of the mistakes that I see people make in this piece. So in Measure 1, we start on beat 1. Did you see it? I'm going to do it one more time and I'll give you a hint. It has to do with the left hand. Okay, if you didn't get it, what was happening is I played the first notes on beat 1, and then immediately on beat 2, my left hand lifted and rested. And then on beat 3, I played. Now, this might seem really specific and like too specific, but it's very important because Christian Petzold, the person who wrote the piece, it's not actually by Bach, even though it says Bach, wrote this as a half note, which means it's 2 beats. And if I play it 1, 2, and I lift on beat 2, what I'm technically doing is changing the left hand of measure 1 to be a quarter note on that chord and then a quarter rest. One instance of this might not seem like the biggest deal, but what happens in this piece and in pieces from the Baroque period and the classical period in general is that people will do this to most of the left hand, right? And then what you actually end up with is a completely different sound than what the composer intended. So double check your note values, especially the ones that are supposed to be longer or the ones that are supposed to be shorter with rests. And make sure that if there are longer value notes, you are indeed holding them for the full length. And if there are shorter value notes, that you are in fact observing the rests. It seems subtle, but it completely changes the sound. And it will not only change the sound of this piece, it also just leads to a lot of bad habits having to do with rhythm. And we want to avoid that at all costs. The third thing that most piano players miss in this piece is technique. Now, the technique that is required is always going to depend partially on the articulation that you are trying to accomplish and also the dynamics that you are trying to accomplish. If you have the Confidence Roadmap, which is the complete guide to learning a piece from the ground up with confident musical expression, then you know that milestones 5, 6, and 7, which are the articulation, technique, and dynamics milestones, are intertwined, meaning that you have to have proper technique in order to properly execute articulation and dynamics. So if you decided on detached and then legato, like we talked about in the last point, the only way to pull that off musically is to make sure that your wrist is nice and loose and that it's guiding you through this first measure. Because if you're playing with a stiff wrist, which is what most piano players are doing, it's going to sound very disjointed and very forced, and it will not sound graceful or musical. So I'm going to show you this in slow motion. So this is what it would look like and sound like if you are trying to play these articulation marks and these note values with a very stiff wrist. And you'll see that my wrist isn't going to move. Now, it sounded pretty disjointed, pretty stiff, right? Now, if I can lead with the wrist, what's going to happen is I'm going to drop into the keys, and you're going to see my right hand lift so that I can come up and come down on the first notes of that slur. So I will lift after the first note and come down, and you'll notice that I'm going to lift at the end of the slur again. Right? And I went on to measure 2, but you can see how much my wrist is moving. And that's not just by chance. That's a conscious choice because I'm playing with proper technique. I'm trying to be able to execute that articulation properly with grace so that it sounds musical. And this is true in every single piece that you learn. You have to have the proper technique in order to execute the musical patterns correctly, because the definition of technique is being able to utilize your body in the appropriate way to get the desired sound out of the piano. So if you don't have proper technique, it will never sound very musical. Now, I have a few things to share with you. So if you're struggling with note values and rhythm in general, then the rhythm course would be a really, really, really great option for you. In this course, I teach you how to count out loud and use the metronome without mistakes, even if you've never been successful with it before. I have had beginner through advanced pianists taking this course and seeing huge results with it. They are all able to count out loud and use the metronome, even if they weren't able to before, even if they hadn't been able to for years and years. And then with this third thing that we're talking about with technique, I have a bundle of 10 technique lessons for $10. It's so cheap, and it's hours and hours of really high impactful technique lessons where you get a chance to see me work with real piano players and help them implement proper technique. And if you struggle with technique or you're questioning technique, a $10 investment is nothing in ensuring that you are able to use your body to get the desired sound out of the piano. Now, what we've gone over today is just a couple of the things that you need to keep in mind for measure 1 of this piece. And like you know, they shape not just this measure, but the entire piece. And if measure 1 gave you any sort of insight, then I want to give you a chance to get access to the classes where I walk you through every single measure of this exact piece. And this is actually one of the pieces that we went over in Casual the Confident Piano Player. This is my program for adult piano players where we meet on a weekly basis. And over the course of 5-hour-long classes, we took this entire piece through the Confidence Roadmap. We went over every single milestone. So rhythm, listening, notes, fingering, articulation, dynamics, techniques, all of it. We talked about how to do the ornaments in this piece. Literally everything that you need to learn so that you can learn this piece with confidence. And I bundled those 5 hours of classes together and wanted to make them available to you for like an insanely low price, like cup of coffee low price. And so you'll find the link in the description below and also right here on the end screen. along with another video where I dive even deeper into technique, because if there was one thing I could fix for every piano player, it would be technique. Enjoy and happy practicing.